Okay, Liz, what is the first road trip?
The first time I was ever on a road trip where it was a short one. It was a very short one. And I think I was like a freshman in college. And because like I had been traveling with my family and stuff before, like we did like South Dakota and Yellowstone and stuff like that. But I feel like you can't really call it like your first official road trip if your parents are there. So
Yeah, it's like a road trip with friends then.
yeah, road trip with friends. And so it was me and Allie from Story Eyed Reviews. And we just got in her car with her friend Denise, and we lived in Kansas City at the time, so we drove down to Columbia, Missouri, because all three of us had a hankering for Shakespeare's Pizza. So, like, I know it's only like a 4-hour trip, but it was so much fun. We had a blast. We invented this car game where, like, if you saw cows, the first person to say cows got that herd of cows, and you could kill somebody else's herd of cows if you saw a graveyard first. And so, like, by the end, it was like farm Monopoly. It was hilarious.
That's fun.
What was your first road trip, Casey?
As I said before, my parents are divorced and have lived in different states, so I've been in the car since I was basically a toddler. But and then also we did a lot of family vacations that were road trips. We like drove to Florida. I remember driving to Florida, to Tennessee, like these long, 16, 24-hour trips. I went to New York when I was a freshman in high school. It was a school trip, so that my parents weren't with me, but we were on like a tour bus, so it was less about the drive and more about the destination. So I guess if you're talking about actually like just kind of an impulsive thing like that, the year after I graduated from college, so when I should have been a senior in college, but so I was about 22, 21. My brother's girlfriend at the time was still in school, and she had written an essay about the Crescent Hotel, the haunted hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in St. Louis, and she emailed it to me to ask me to edit it for her, before she turned it in. And I was like, oh, that sounds so fun. I want to go there. And it was Labor Day, or it was Memorial Day weekend. So I called my friend Kelly, who is my best friend since like fourth grade, and was like, hey, do you want to go to the Crescent Hotel this weekend? And she was like, sure. So I left St. Louis, drove to Springfield, Missouri, picked her up, and then we drove to Eureka Springs. We got lost on the way because that was before smartphones, and so we had to buy a map and get our way the rest of like we're literally using an actual paper map to get to Eureka Springs. And then when we got to Eureka Springs, it turned out there was a motorcycle convention.
Oh no.
And all of the hotels in Eureka Springs and any of the surrounding towns within 50 miles were full. And so we ended up sleeping in the car and like washing off in like gas station bathroom, and like then we watched some episodes of like Supernatural on my laptop in a McDonald's while we had breakfast. And then we went to the ghost hotel and did the tour, and then slept in the car again and drove home. It was a whole adventure. At one point we got a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. It was very much like this book is going to be, in the sense of like everything that could go wrong went wrong, but in the end it was a really good story, so it was worth it,
Yeah.
Welcome to This Is Lit, a podcast where we drink and talk about our favorite books. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Casey.
So raise a glass and let's get started.
Okay, Liz, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking whiskey Coke. Mostly whiskey.
Well, I have already been drinking this morning. I had rum in my coffee. So I decided to stick to wine. I'm drinking, although I noticed not a
That's definitely not a 9-ounce pour, my friend.
9-ounce pour. It's Lambrusco, which is a sweet red by Riuniti is the brand that I like. So we always have this particular wine in the house. So I was like, that's what I'll drink.
Yeah. Well, I've got my cut glass tumbler, and the whiskey came out of the cut glass crystal decanter that for some reason my family keeps giving my husband for Christmas. We've got 3 now.
And how you're like, I'm drinking fancy whiskey out of a cut glass whiskey decanter and tumbler, and I'm like,
it's not super fancy.
drinking $5 red wine out of a wine glass that I found in a box on the side of the road.
Did you really find it in a box on the side of the road?
Literally, one of our neighbors, they were moving and they're like selling their house in an estate sale. And so like they were doing that thing that people sometimes do in like urban areas where they just pile shit that they don't want to take to a Goodwill on the curb and then like see what happens. And there was a box with a dozen crystal wine glasses in it. Like set. And so I was like, well, this is mine. I mean, glass is easy to clean. So I like brought it home and I sanitized it and washed it all. But now we use them all the time and they're really fun wine glasses. So
yeah, that's half the battle sometimes is the fun container that the drinks get to go in.
Yeah. So right before Liz went on maternity leave, we read Rainbow Rowell's Carry On. This is the sequel, the second book in the Simon Snow series, Wayward Son. That's what we're reading today. The first book was about a young wizard who was the chosen one, kind of in a Harry Potter style.
Yeah.
And his mentor, the mage, and his mortal enemy, eventually lover, the vampire Boz, and his best friend Penny. And the book was a lot of fun. We both really enjoyed it. So we figured whenever this one came out that we would have to read it as well. And my fiance got it for me for Christmas. So I've just been holding on to it since then. So yeah, this book is a sequel, a direct sequel. It takes place after Carry On. And the thing about it is that
Carry On was supposed to be something similar to like
Harry Potter.
Yeah, Deathly Hallows. It was supposed to be something like this is the end.
Yeah, this is the culmination of the chosen one's destiny. And unfortunately, most fantasy book series end there. Like it usually ends with like the happy ever after, the chosen one, or the Harry Potter, the horrible epilogue that we all like to razz. But for Rainbow Rowell, she decided to continue.
She started with the end.
Yeah, so since her first book was actually the end of the hero's journey, the second book deals a lot with like the fallout, which Harry Potter did a little bit of. And I hate to keep comparing this to Harry Potter because especially after reading this book, I don't feel like they're comparable anymore. Like
no, they're not. They're definitely not.
It definitely started with the book Fangirl, and it was like Boz and Simon fan fiction. That was definitely parodying Harry Potter. And then when she decided to do it herself and make Boz and Simon like a canon pairing in an actual story, it started to move away from that concept, and now it has completely moved away into a much different context, and I would even argue maybe a more superior context. So basically, Harry Potter did delve into it. Simon Snow delves into it much more. What happens to somebody whose entire destiny is built up as a one thing they have to accomplish, and then
they accomplish it.
Yeah, especially as a teenager, like a chosen one who's a teenager, and it's like you're 17 or 18 and you've accomplished your life's goal or like your life's purpose. Then what? Yeah,
because most chosen ones, especially in like ancient lore and stuff, like back going to like Greek myths, Roman myths, a lot of the chosen ones don't survive to have an after their destiny.
A lot of times it costs them their lives. A lot of times the sacrifice to win is
their life.
But
another series that does this really well that I like binge watched in like one day is I am a huge fan of Steven Universe. And so the whole first series was done beautifully and masterfully by Rebecca Sugar. Rebecca Sugar listened to our podcast. And they did kind of a limited run series called Steven Universe Future. And like the first series ends with Steven being like 14 and bringing peace to the universe and stuff like that. And so then the future is how does Steven finally deal with all the trauma that he experienced as a kid, which is also something that Simon has experienced. How does he deal with all the trauma that happened to him? What does he do now? And so Simon now is like, well, my whole identity was wrapped up in being this chosen one and being magical and having the mage around to kind of guide me. And now the mage is dead. He has no magic left whatsoever. He still has wings and a tail. And he had never planned for what to do with his life after the Insidious Humdrum was defeated, because I don't think he figured he would survive.
He assumed he was going to die.
Yeah.
And I think for Simon, the big thing, like, there's lots of trauma here, there's also a lot of stuff he didn't know and has still not learned.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is that he doesn't have his magic anymore.
No. And
Simon complained throughout the whole first book that he was no good at magic. He wasn't a good mage. And that he kind of resented his magic. But it was such a huge part of his identity. Even though he didn't know how to control it, he was very powerful. And that was him being powerful as a mage was a huge part of his identity. And now he doesn't have that anymore.
No. And so Simon Snow starts off this book lost.
He has pretty bad depression and like PTSD from everything that happened. And it doesn't help that like the mages are so insular and they don't interact with like normal humans.
No.
Really at all. And so like Simon's like, do I have a place in the world of mages anymore? I don't have a place in the world of humans because again, I look like a fucking dragon.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening, and he's basically been the way that it's described in the book I thought is very interesting because just like the first book, this book jumps from the POVs of the different characters.
Yes.
So Boz kind of is the one who tells us what's going on with Simon at the beginning. Because Boz and Simon started dating at the end of the last book. Well, Boz and Penny finished school, and Simon, of course, didn't because he couldn't do magic anymore.
No.
Penny and Simon got an apartment together, a flat together, and Boz is there most of the time. And he even says at the beginning, like right after everything happened for the first month or two, things were awesome. Me and Simon were spending all our time together. We were lovey-dovey. We were physically affectionate with each other. And then he just like shut down. And he's been on the couch. He doesn't have a job. We don't leave him alone. Like either Penny or I is with him at all times.
Yeah, which is probably pretty smart.
Well, yeah, it's smart, but like it's a very subtle way to be like, rather than being like, I'm just gonna be like, this character has suicidal like feelings or whatever. It's just like this character's friends are afraid to leave him alone.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what he'll do. And so it starts out real bad. And it actually, I think, starts out specifically with Boz being like, should I break up with Simon before he breaks up with me? And Simon, from his perspective, is like, should I break up with Boz so he doesn't have to tolerate me anymore?
Simon thinks so little of himself. He sees as letting Boz go as a, he's like, I care about Boz, and he's just sticking around for me, and I'm clearly not worthy of him, so maybe I should just let him go. And then in the midst of all this, Penny bursts in and says, I have 3 tickets to Chicago. We're going on a road trip to America to see my boyfriend and Agatha.
Yeah. So Penny has decided that she wants to see her boyfriend, Micah, who she has not seen for 3 years, I think.
Yeah, 3 years.
In person. Like they write each other and stuff, and they Skype
3 years.
But they haven't seen each other in person for 3 years.
But they video called and stuff like that.
And she wants to see him. She wants to see Agatha, who at the end of the last book ran away to California and started life as a normal.
Which I don't blame her because the mage tried to kill her.
Yeah, well, a lot of things tried to kill Agatha.
Poor Agatha. I feel real bad for Agatha in this book.
Yeah.
She's got the worst luck.
Agatha is in California. Penny wants to go see...
Agatha is in California with her roommate Ginger, who they're both doing this kind of... It starts off, you think,
Silicon Valley tech
cleanse thing.
Yeah, it's like a Silicon Valley tech bro, pseudoscience health retreat, whatever.
If you Scientology and veganism with more hippies, you would get whatever this thing is supposed to be.
Yeah, it's probably pretty familiar to anybody who's ever interacted with a Silicon Valley bro at all. So, but that's happening, and Penny's like, we're going to go on a road trip. She's like, we'll fly into Chicago. Micah lives in the suburbs of Chicago, and then we'll drive to San Diego and see
It can't be that far.
Which is hilarious because, again, going back to the whole concept of road trips and stuff.
Yes.
From what I understand, people in Europe consider, like, anything that's more than an hour to be, like, a full day trip. Like, if you're driving more than an hour, you're staying the night wherever you're going.
And us Midwesterners are like, why would we fly? It's a 6-hour drive.
Yeah, coastal people in the United States, well, I guess East Coast people, maybe have this attitude a little bit like the Europeans because all the states are so small and close together. So like you can pop through 3 states in the East Coast in like a 2-hour drive. But it's not, even then, it's not as extensive because like there are states that are bigger than the countries in Europe. And to the West, like, I mean, I've lived in 10 or 11 states, and I've traveled to 39 states.
Yeah.
And most of it's been done by car. The furthest I've ever driven would either be New York or Florida. New York's about 24 hours from Missouri. Florida, about 18.
Yeah. Say the furthest Paul and I, like the furthest we've ever driven is I think probably the trip Paul and I just did when we went to Virginia. We drove.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, being 10 weeks pregnant, stuck in a car for 2 days straight, and then have a heat wave hit, and then 2 days straight back. Not fun. There was a bucket. There was a bucket involved.
Yeah, no, like I'm used to road tripping, and like, I mean, for work, like routinely, 6 hours round trip in one day. But that's not the way it is in European culture because all the countries are so small. And so people don't drive as much. So Penny makes this kind of assumption that they can drive from Chicago to San Diego without fully understanding the ramifications of the distance of that trip.
I've heard it said
about it because he wants to do something that he thinks will help Simon.
Yeah. And he's like, a change of scenery would be good. And, you know, like back to Europeans, I've heard it said that in Europe, 100 miles is a long way, but in America, 100 years is a long time.
Yeah. So they fly to Chicago.
And it starts off with this beautiful, gorgeous teal Mustang convertible.
Yeah, well, they fly to Chicago. There's a lot more of like the internal thoughts of both Boz and Simon, like worrying about the other one, like wondering what's happening between them, not being willing to touch each other, be physically affectionate with each other. They finally land in Chicago, and Penny has rented for them a teal convertible, Mustang convertible.
God, I want one of those.
A very pretty car, which is also a very lacking in understanding of American cars.
Yeah.
And gas mileage they get and things like that.
But it's so pretty.
So pretty, and like, who doesn't want to drive cross country in a convertible? You know? Well,
you had a 67 Impala for the longest time, my dear.
I did.
We're all allowed faults when it comes to classic cars.
I'm not criticizing her for liking classic cars, just for coming to a brand new country and not knowing. The other thing that they learn as soon as they hit America is that their spells don't work as well.
Yeah. Because the language is different. The turn of phrase, the slang.
This is something I really enjoyed that the first book did, but it didn't delve into it as much as it did in this book, is that magic comes from normal people.
Yeah, it does.
Like, there have to be normal people who are using a language in an area in order for mages to be able to
use magic.
They can only use magic if there are normals putting the language out there because the magic is in the language.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's a big difference between British and American slang, and even between like some basic words like that are not slang words. Like the first thing that comes to mind is lift versus elevator, flat versus apartment.
Yeah. Chips, fries.
Which means that a lot of British spells don't work in America.
No.
Like I think bugger off is a spell, which is supposed to like make someone go away.
Push them back.
Push them back, and it does not work. And they're just kind of figuring this out slowly as they go to see Micah. And that's when we get a chapter from Penny's point of view as she pulls up to Micah. Penny's very overbearing, doesn't listen very well, always thinks her ideas are the best.
Yeah.
And comes back to bite her in the ass here because Micah essentially has considered that they have been broken up for a year and a half.
Yeah, and has a new girl.
And has already started dating someone else. And so when Penny shows up at his house unannounced, he's like,
I was like, boyfriend. He's like, what the hell?
I broke up with you 3 or 4 times. My girlfriend is here. You need to go. And so Penny is pretty brokenhearted, which also means she's like not very capable of decision making. Because at this point, they've realized that it's going to take them several days to get from Chicago to San Diego.
31 hours. And they're like, what the hell?
It's a 31-hour drive.
There is a very cute scene here where Baz is trying to teach Simon how to drive. It's so cute.
Yeah, it's very, very cute.
Because Baz is the only one who knows how to drive.
Right. Baz is a driver.
And then, but after this, Penny kind of goes into shutdown mode.
Yes. And so they go to the Cheesecake Factory.
Yay, the Cheesecake Factory, the all-American institution, the Cheesecake Factory.
Cheesecake Factory is wild. I don't know if it is all across the United States or if it's just a Midwestern franchise.
Cheesecake Factory menu is longer than certain legislation.
Yeah. Cheesecake Factory menu is like 30 pages long. And like no cohesive thing that ties it together. It's like
there's buffalo
and there's like pad thai and there's like spaghetti and there's like it's very, very all over the place in terms of ethnicity.
I like their chicken piccata. That's real good, but I can only have it once in a blue moon because it's like 10 billion calories.
I like their fried mac and cheese.
Oh yeah, that's good too. And their cheesecake, Oreo cheesecake. That's my favorite thing.
Yeah, they also have just an extensive menu of cheesecake. So they go here for this, and we're already running into several problems. The first of which being magic isn't working very well. The second of which being they don't have the money to make the trip they thought they were going to make. The third of which being that Baz is starving.
Yeah.
Because Baz, if you don't remember, is a vampire.
Yes.
And he feeds exclusively on animals because he doesn't want to be because vampires in Britain are basically not allowed. They're
illegal in Britain.
They're hunted and killed, and the only reason Baz is an exception to that rule is because his whole family basically pretends he's not a vampire and lets him go about vampire business in private. And since he only eats animals, he's been able to kind of fly under the radar in Britain. But in the United States, after being on a transatlantic flight, he's really starting to feel it.
The sun.
And then Penny is also exacerbating this problem because she is very upset and she is seeking physical comfort, hanging on to him, slumping over on his arm. And he ends up leaving the Cheesecake Factory and going to find some cats, some
stray cats,
yeah, and drain them in the alleyway. So Baz is having a very bad time. He does not like America.
No, which there's this whole list that he does where he's like, things I don't like. And he's like, this song, Kansas, the band, Kansas, the state. And I'm like,
sun, the last
sun,
this car,
the sun.
And Simon,
the humidity,
loves
the sun.
America. Simon absolutely loves it.
Yeah.
He loves driving the car. He loves being on the road. He likes the sunshine. And this kind of exactly Baz's whole feeling that he doesn't belong, he and Simon are not going to work because he can't be what Simon wants him to be or what Simon needs. And so it's kind of this feeling of inadequacy as he watches Simon enjoy this. And then they decide they're going to try and go see Agatha anyway, specifically because it has not been answering text messages.
Yeah, let's just finish the trip. What could possibly happen? Because Agatha has not been responding to Penelope's text messages.
And that's when we find out that Agatha, while she's at this retreat, it has kind of taken a sinister turn. She has been separated from her friend Ginger and taken to a different location by this weird tech bro who keeps Braden, who keeps talking about immortality and freedom, and eventually tells her that he knows that she can do magic.
It's very cult-like.
Yeah.
It's very, even before he gets into the, I think you can do magic, he's trying to decode, her genome, and he's talking to her about how special she is, and he's talking about...
kidnapped her.
Yeah, basically kidnapped her. And he's talking about, immortality, it's really achievable, and it's a very, very... the first sign, for me, is they're oh yeah, they made us check all of our phones before we got in here, but I had mine stuffed in my bra. I'm if they don't want you to have contact with the outside world, that is a cult.
And she does leave a message for Penny.
Yeah, because she's getting scared.
She leaves a voicemail for Penny saying, I don't know what's going on, and then they catch her with her phone and they take it away, and they talk for a while without realizing it's still recording.
Yeah.
So Penny gets this message with strangers' voices and Agatha's phone being taken away from her. And they're like, well, even if we didn't want to continue the trip, now we have to because something has happened to Agatha.
Yeah. That gives them proper motivation to keep going.
So they drive through, And Baz, basically is mentally complaining about all the things he doesn't like. And they stop in Ohio at a Renaissance fair.
Woo! That's also, I think, a very strictly American thing, is the Ren Fest.
Yeah, it didn't even occur to me that was the case until I was reading this. And then they were so taken off guard by it. But yeah, so for those of our listeners who don't know, a Ren Fest is when you go out to a muddy field in the middle of nowhere full of wooden stalls that people can sell things, and it's all medieval fantasy themed.
Casey and I go every year.
People dress up for it. They sell like actual swords. They sell jewelry, weird foods like turkey legs. It's a very, very fun.
Incense. There's also a lot of just crafts people there, like leather workers and woodworkers, which is really fun. But they also do shows. There's a Robin Hood and Marian show we see every year at our Ren Fest.
Yeah, and the Ren Fest, I don't know if all Ren Fests are this way, but our Ren Fest is it is like set in a specific time period of medieval England. Like they have like actual real historical kings and queens portrayed by actors in the park.
Yeah. So
they have Henry and like Anne Boleyn or whoever.
Yeah. And then there's always like the weird steampunk goth people. And then there's always the guy who dresses up as the 11th Doctor. And there's always the Star Trek crew that beams down. These are like and then there's always the dog with fairy wings.
It's basically like a Comic-Con in the woods.
It is. It's pretty much Comic-Con in the woods.
It's like it's kind of like a medieval Comic-Con in the woods. And they are delighted by this. Yes. Simon is able to go through the Ren Fair without any kind of cloaking magic hiding his wings and tail.
Which is and everybody is like, that's an awesome cosplay, dude.
Yeah. And so he's able to do that. They're all kind of exploring around, having a good time, and things go south when Boz recognizes a group of teenagers dressed like vampires.
That are actually vampires.
And they are luring young women off with them into the woods to feed on them. And Boz
done the full Edward Cullen glitter shit.
Yeah. And Boz and Simon, again coming from the United Kingdom where
vampires are illegal,
and this is like a huge crime, they go after the vampires and start a fucking fight. And this is the first time that they get into real trouble because so far they're trying to use their magic for convenience reasons, and now they're trying to use their magic in combat, and they don't know how to use magic here. Trying to use the bugger off spell to push vampires back.
And he hears a voice say, try buzz off, and that works a lot better. Because he's like, I would tell them to fuck off, but using curses in spells makes the spell horribly unstable.
Yeah. So someone in the audience recommends he use buzz off instead of bugger off. He does, it works, and they, between Penelope, Simon, and Boz, they eventually dispatch 6 vampires. And lucky for them,
everyone thinks this is part of the Renfest show.
Everyone thinks it's a show. Lucky for them, because they just killed 6 people in public in broad daylight. And they
with crowd, with magic.
They basically rush out, get in the car, and drive away as fast as they can.
Yeah, they're like, we're getting the hell out of Dutch. And they think everything's going fine until one of them realizes the same pair of headlights has been following them for a while.
Simon notices that they're being followed. They've gone through an entire another state. They're in the middle of nowhere, and this truck is following them and flashing.
And they break down in the middle of...
Well, they go off the interstate.
They go off the interstate and break down in the middle of nowhere, BFE, Nebraska.
And the truck follows them, and a man gets out of the truck, introduces himself as Shepherd. He says he's the one who saw them at the Ren Fair.
Bless Shepherd.
Recommended the buzz-off spell.
Yeah.
But you're a normal. Why would you know anything about spells or magic? They're very hostile.
People talk to me.
They try to use magic on him, and they can't use magic at all. It's not even about the wording now. They just can't do it at all.
Yeah.
And he says this is a dead zone. There are no people here. It's a quiet zone. Yeah. It's a quiet zone. There are no people here. There are no normals here, which means that there's no language for you to draw on for your magic. Magic doesn't work here.
They would have run into in Europe because in Europe everyone's so stacked on top of each other that there's not really a chance for a quiet zone.
Yeah, it really this book does a really good job of emphasizing how empty parts of the United States are. There's no one in There's like one, I think I read one time there's one person for every 26 square miles in Montana.
Yeah. God, Montana, there is nothing there. Have you ever been to Montana? There's nothing.
Yeah, I've been to Montana. Montana, Nebraska, Idaho.
Nebraska has more corn than people.
Yeah, even Kansas. Kansas, we live in
Kansas. To western Kansas?
Once you get past Hays, Kansas,
nothing.
which is about in the middle of the state, if you didn't get gas in Hays, you won't be able to get gas until
you won't be able to make it to Colorado.
Border in Colorado. So like you actually have to, like there are places in the United States where you actually have to gauge your gas, because if you don't have enough gas in your car, you can run out in the middle of nowhere and not be able to get to a gas station. I was in Nebraska with Kim in the company I work for, the Murder Mystery Company. We have another actor who travels a lot, and he and I were traveling together in Oklahoma. And
Oklahoma's bad too.
We almost ran out of gas. We found a gas pump that was literally standing by itself in the middle of nowhere in a field, just like a single gas pump that was card activated. And that's how we managed to get to the next town.
You know how you picture like the cornfield in the horror movie with the one scarecrow or whatever? That is 80% of Nebraska and western Kansas. And Oklahoma.
So Shepard introduces them to the idea of quiet zones. He also tells them that in America, magicians are called speakers.
Yes. And he's a talker. A normal is a talker.
Yeah, speakers and talkers versus normals and mages. There are a fair amount of talkers who know about the speakers.
Yeah.
There are also other magical creatures. Now, there are magical creatures in Europe as well. Most of them do not interact with mages. There are a couple of students in the first book, if I remember correctly, who are like part pixie.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like fairies and magical creatures don't interact with mages.
And a lot of them escaped Europe and came to America in the early days.
Now, the book doesn't get into this as much as I would have liked it to.
Yeah.
But there is kind of a truce between the speakers and the other magical creatures, which is that speakers don't come into quiet zones.
No, they don't.
Because magical creatures don't require talkers to be magic. They just are. And so that's their area. The quiet zones are for them, and the cities are for the speakers. So they've violated this treaty by coming into this quiet zone in Nebraska, and they get attacked by several creatures. They're kind of reminiscent of a lot of like the urban legend monsters, like chupacabras and the black-eyed children. I'm trying to think of Mothman would probably be one. Mothman, Spring Heel Jack. All of these old American monster legends.
Man.
Not to mention like all sorts of Native American spirits and monsters, especially in that part of the country. And the ones that get them are
skinwalkers.
There's a skunk that can walk on its hind legs. It's human size. It speaks English. There's a man with antlers. There are 3 or 4 of these kind of desert magical monsters that attack them. They show up behind Shepard, and the mages at first think that Shepard has lured them into a trap, but then he helps them to escape from these guys.
Yeah. And he's like, "Hi, I'm Shepard. I'm a big puppy dog, and I just want to talk to you."
So Shepard helps them escape from these monsters. They drive away. He's like, if we get out of the quiet zone, hopefully they won't be following us anymore. And he tells them that he is a regular, normal human, a talker.
Yeah.
Who has managed to learn a lot about magical creatures and mages by simply engaging. He like seeks out these creatures. He has water spirits as his friends. He knows dragons.
Which that's a fun idea.
He's never had a chance to actually talk to mages, though, because mages are still pretty secretive. So he's really eager to talk to them and learn more about them.
Yeah, he's like, new friends, hello. Hi, I'm Shepard.
They do not trust him at all because, again, mages don't interact with normals at all in Europe.
No, not at all. You're not even supposed to marry into them.
Yeah, like it's considered frowned upon for them to marry each other. And so they are just, as soon as we get to the hotel, we're going to wipe his memory and we're going to run. Which is what they do. And they run, and they keep going, and then...
They stop so Baz can eat.
Yeah, so Baz could eat.
They get pretty much captured by Margaret, and Shepard shows to talk her out of it, and then they realize Margaret is a freaking dragon.
So Baz is really struggling with the whole trip. He's like sunburned, he's starving, and they stop for him to eat, and they get caught by a dragon who owns the sheep that he drank.
Yeah.
And she is not happy about it.
No.
And she basically, from what I understand, she's the the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, she is the mountains.
Like, she comes to them in a human form, but the Rocky Mountains are actually the back of this massive dragon, which lives in the desert.
Which is cool.
Cool concept.
But Shepard shows up and is like, Maggie, they're just tourists. They don't know. They're fine. Let them go. And she's like, fine, you can all go except for Simon. Kitten doesn't know where he is, and she thinks Simon is a dragon.
Simon is a dragon because he has dragon tail and wings.
And they're like, no. He comes too.
So Shepard successfully gets this dragon to release them, and they agree to go with him again, although they're very confused as to how he has
remembers. Because Penny's spell did not work on him.
So Penelope's like, oh, well, I'll use the spell again later. Penelope is the most antagonistic towards him. Penelope, it's interesting because Penelope, Harry Potter, again, I know.
Yeah.
Talked about this is not Harry Potter, but like there's a pretty obvious parallels drawn between Harry, Draco, and Hermione.
Yes.
Especially in the first book. But Penelope is probably the most like blood will out.
Yeah.
Three of them. Like, she's kind of elitist. She thinks mages are better than humans. She thinks humans are basically, cattle for them.
Yeah.
And she's probably the most actively aggressive towards non-magic users. And so she's really...
If I was her and because her mother is also now a major member of council, is running the Watford School Board. Her mother is a major political figure, and her mother has consistently for years since she was a kid drilled into her head, we cannot let the normals know about us. Yeah. Then we'll have witch hunts all over again, which was something that never really took hold here in America besides Salem. And, it was one of those things that they're like, we can't ever let this happen again, ever. So, of course, as soon as Shepard shows up and he knows so much about the magical world, she's like, what the hell?
Yeah. So she doesn't
not how it's supposed to work.
But he really is really charmed by her, and he agrees to take them to...
begrudgingly starts liking him.
She
by the way, Chip.
He agrees to take them to the Hoover Dam, where a water spirit that he knows lives, to get more information about where Agatha might be.
Yeah.
And the water spirit tells them that they need to go to Vegas. So they go to Vegas.
Now next, people.
Yeah, something about Now Next and Las Vegas.
Because Now Next believes they are the next evolution of humanity.
Well, we haven't gotten to there yet. We don't know that about Now Next. All we know is the name Now Next and that they need to go to Vegas.
And Vegas, which...
So...
Vegas is definitely an American concept. It is indulgent. It is bright. It is lawless.
Vegas is... I've never been to Vegas.
My dad has been many, many times for conventions, and he's like, don't go. He's told me, he's like, as my daughter, don't go. Stay home. It's safer.
I don't think it's probably as bad as all that, but it is definitely different than anything else.
But my father is overprotective.
And they go to Vegas. They check into this very fancy hotel. Again, at this point, they're using all fake money. All of it is magicked. God only knows what's going to happen to that money after they give it over to people.
Yeah.
But they get into this fancy hotel, and they know now that Now Next are vampires.
Yes, and so they send in Baz undercover.
To a vampire party.
Yeah, to a vampire party. And there he meets Lamb, which I was suspicious of him right off the bat, simply because his name is Lamb.
Yeah.
Like lamb to slaughter.
He meets a vampire named Lamb, who is much older than he is.
Much.
Lamb gets him real drunk at a party, and they just chit-chat a lot. And Baz is kind of fascinated because Baz has always been told that vampires are illegal, that he has to pretend he's not a vampire, and he has no idea of anything about vampires or their culture.
Basically, what he discovers is that vampires run Las Vegas.
There are several cities in America, it sounds like, that are run by vampires, and that humans are only in these cities as food for these vampires. This is also when he learns that you don't have to completely drain and kill something to feed off of it, and you can leave it alive without turning it.
Yeah. Because Baz was turned when he was a small child, so he doesn't exactly remember his turning. Yeah. But I suspect it's one of those things where it's like a bite alone is not going to turn you. It might be you need to share blood kind of a thing to turn. But
the book never really tells us. The book never really tells us. It just tells us that you can feed on something without turning it or killing it, which to Baz is a huge deal because he hates killing things. And then so he doesn't get the information he needs.
Lamb also kind of half drugs him because he's like, yeah, we'll just get a milkshake. And then he's like, oh yeah, there's alcohol in that milkshake. Everything that you've had tonight that I have given you has had alcohol in it. And I'm like, Baz, honey, you should know better than that.
Yeah. So Baz leaves the party with Lamb and very nearly is made to bite a human.
Yeah.
Lamb tries to convince him to bite a human because he thinks that Baz is malnourished because he only eats animals.
Yeah.
And Baz gets out of it, luckily, because Simon shows up. And Simon is very, very jealous of Lamb. He thinks that Baz would rather be with vampires. He thinks that Baz would rather be with Lamb.
He does.
And so he's really jealous. They kind of...
Because for some reason, Baz is just very trusting of Lamb, which is very out of character for Baz.
Again, I think it's because no one has ever talked to Baz about his, like, there's a whole entire part of his identity that he's being made to hide from the world and pretend that he doesn't have. And so somebody is allowing him to talk about it openly for the first time.
That, even to a certain point, has been, even though, like, Penny and Simon know, he's never fed in front of them before.
Right.
Till the book.
Right. And then in this book, this is when things go downhill because then Baz has to go out and Penny calls a bunch of birds into the hotel room for him, and he kills a bunch of birds in the bathroom and eats them.
Yeah.
And he just feels like shit. And then the next day he's set to meet up with Lamb again, and Simon and Shepherd and Penny are going to follow. And he meets up with Lamb again over lunch. Lamb teaches him that he doesn't have to drop his fangs to eat, like when he's eating regular food. And Lamb asks him, he says, how old are you? He says, I'm 20. And Lamb says, okay, yeah, I'm 35. How old are you? And Baz is like, I'm 20. And that's kind of when Lamb, and I really do think Lamb does care about Baz in a certain way.
Yeah.
He's like,
I think he cares about, like, it's very, Baz is hanging out with kind of like, he's like, oh, well, you'll change your mind about how you feel about humanity when you've outlived everyone you cared about.
Well, because Lamb is over 300 years old. Lamb came over from Europe.
Yeah, a very long time ago.
300 some odd years ago. And it sounds like a lot of the vampires in Vegas are at least a century old. And so then he's got this child here, essentially, who knows nothing about his own kind.
Yeah.
And so he gets kind of paternal over Baz. And Baz is like, my friend Agatha went missing, and we were told that now next are vampires. So I was hoping that you could tell me where they are and how to get to them. And Lamb does not like now next.
No, he hates them. He says, yes, they're all vampires, but they're all like internet gurus and CEOs and, they're people who think they have earned immortality.
They, not only that, but they are changing each other just at random. Like, vampires very rarely intentionally change people.
And there's, like, apparently, he's like, there's a board of directors who, look at people who've applied for membership.
Yeah.
He's like,
it's very, very
attitude
about vampirism.
It's a very new world vampire versus an old world vampire.
It's like commodifying vampirism into capitalism. and he hates it.
Because what is not benefiting from capitalism?
Right. And so the other thing about the Now Next vampires is that they want to be able to do magic, because vampires can't do magic.
No, they can't. But they think they've earned the right to be able to perform magic. They want to be speakers.
The only person that we know of at this time who is both a vampire and magic.
Yes. Born magic and then turned into a vampire.
Well, because I mean, Nicodemus was that too.
Ebb's brother. He was magic and then turned into a vampire.
But he doesn't have magic now. And he doesn't.
No.
Yeah, like he was stripped of his teeth, and I don't
magic somehow.
But most generally speaking, vampires, if you're made a vampire, they generally make normals vampires.
Yeah, and Penny and Simon and Baz all know that if vampires are able to do magic, then it's over for the mages.
They'd be completely at the top of the food chain.
Yeah, it'd be over for the magicians. They own and rule everything.
Yeah. So they convince Lamb to help them find Agatha. Lamb very quickly finds out that Baz is not on his own.
Yeah, he has friends.
And Simon does not trust Lamb. His help.
Penny. But Penny
doesn't trust him, but she wants his help.
Because she's like, we don't have any other way to get help right now, and I don't trust him, but what option do we have? And Baz is like, he's helping us, I trust him, and Simon's like, I don't like any of this at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
But they end up going with Lamb to this area.
Which that he'll take them to where the Now Next vampires lab is, and that they can storm the lab, and that his vampires will follow behind.
Yeah, and he's like, the speakers go first, Baz, you stay back here with me.
What ends up happening is that, because also Lamb doesn't know that Baz has magic.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is that he has brought them into another quiet zone.
Yeah. It's a small one, but it's there.
To basically hand Simon and Penny over to the Now Next vampires. There's a treaty between the San Diego vampires and the Las Vegas vampires.
Is that if ever speakers?
The San Diego vampires will stay out of Vegas as long as any speakers that come to Vegas are sent to the San Diego Now Next vampires.
Yeah, but they get up there and Agatha is there, tied up, like crying hysterically, because poor Agatha, all she wanted to do was like get away from the life-threatening situations, and what happened? She stumbles right back into one.
Right.
I feel real bad for Agatha. I'm like, she didn't want any of this. She wasn't looking for any of this. It just keeps finding her. Poor thing. I'm so sorry.
So guns come out. Simon is shot out of the sky.
Yeah.
Been flying a lot since they got
Penny luckily had the forethought to her heirloom stone that she uses to cast. She swallowed it, so that way she is then the conductor. So between her and Agatha, they're able to.
Well, they don't. They're in a dead zone, so they don't think they can cast.
No, they can cast it all.
Basically, Lamb is keeping Boz back from the fight. Simon's been shot out of the sky. Penny and Agatha are thrown in the back of a truck, tied up with their mouths sealed shut, because they also can't do magic with their mouths if they can't speak.
And this is all in like the last 30 pages. So like, this is insane.
So things take a turn because Boz breaks free of Lamb and just goes absolutely apeshit on Braden.
Because Braden was the one who shot Simon, and Baz is like, my boyfriend.
He thinks Simon's dead.
Yeah, he does. Baz loses it.
So Baz thinks Simon's dead. He just goes full feral vampire on Braden and several of the other vampires. And at the same time, Agatha realizes that she can use magic again because there is a Burning Man.
Yeah.
Burning Man is happening again.
Burning Lad or something like that.
Something like that. But Burning
Man out in the desert at the same time.
So it's no longer a dead zone. A place that is usually a dead zone has become something else. And Agatha has one special skill, which is that she can cast fire without speaking. So she uses Penny as a conductor because Penny has her
Stone, Inner
she
Stone.
uses Penny as a conductor, and she sets the entire car on fire. She basically, it's like, she kills the vampire that's in the car with them, and they're like, well, we'll go up in flames too, we're going to die, but that's better than being with people.
But Shepard saves them.
Shepard saves them. He also realizes that magic is working again, and he tells Boz, and Boz is able to absolutely annihilate like 6 vampires.
Because he also swears a couple of times with his spells, and he's like, the spells work half the time, so I cast twice as many. But we also discover that Shepard, a vampire, bit him, and it made the vampire sick.
Yeah, it died. The vampire died.
Yeah. And Shepard's like, dude, trust me, you don't want to bite me. Bad things are going to happen. And then he dies, and he's like, I told you.
So they managed to fight off the vampires. Lamb and his squad retreat. Lamb tries to convince Baz to go with him, but Baz refuses. And they all take one of the cars, and Shepard drives them out of there. They're
to Agatha's apartment.
Yeah, and they're all casting healing spells on each other.
They're all beat to hell.
I think one of my favorite moments in this section, it's kind of, there's 2 moments that happen. It's first off whenever Agatha uses Penny as a conduit so that she can cast magic. Yeah. Because there's a ton of talk about how in the world of mages, like, family is very important.
Yes.
And people, like, the mages are loyal to each other, but they're loyal to their own specific families more than anything else.
Yeah.
So, like, for Agatha to be allowed to use someone else's heirloom magic. And then immediately
that is one of Penny's family spells.
Yeah, he uses one of his family's personal spells to heal Penny. And so there's really nice, like, the 4 of them are... And Shepard, even Shepard at this point, the 5 of them are...
This is a very found family kind of a thing.
It's very much become a found family kind of thing, which
I'm a slut for that trope.
I'm a sucker for the found family trope. But yeah, so they go back to Agatha's apartment. Agatha says she'll go back to England with them, but only to get her wand. Because she doesn't want anything to do with the world of mages anymore, but she now cannot... She has decided she will acknowledge that she is magic, and she will continue to use magic on her own. And America seems like a good place for Agatha if that's the case.
Yeah.
Mages
there in America, they're very isolated. There's not a, like, school of witchcraft and wizardry kind of a thing.
No, it's kind of just like families. You learn from your families. It's very it's kind of almost a counter. Like, we've talked about the Harry Potter comparison.
Yeah.
Kind of almost a counter to what J.K. Rowling, like, a few years after Harry Potter, came up with Ilvermorny, which is supposed to be the American School of Magic, but doesn't take into account.
No, there's too many people here for one wizarding school.
Well, there's too many people, and there's too many different cultures. Like, the thing is, like, sure, Scotland and Ireland and England can send all their kids to the same magic school because culturally they're the same. But, like, in terms of, like, race and, and, like, there's so much diversity of that in the United States that you'd have to have a magic school, I mean, at least in, like, each region, let alone each state. And
Texas alone probably could house one.
So instead, J.K. Rowling did was there's a magic school in America. And what Rainbow Rowell did is like, oh, no, magic is taught by individual families.
Just because they're all just spread out.
Rowling is Scottish, so she doesn't have a full understanding of that. And Rainbow Rowell's from Nebraska. So
I'm so sorry, Rainbow Rowell, about all the corn comments earlier.
I mean, she lives in Omaha, I think. So.
Well, I have to say that the university I went to for the longest time was rivals with the University of Nebraska. Mm-hmm. So I am a little biased when it comes to Nebraska, and I can admit that.
So, basically, Simon and Boz have a little heart-to-heart on the beach. They haven't resolved everything. They still haven't really talked about anything.
But Simon is more himself now than he was at the beginning of the book.
Yes. They still haven't talked about what's going on with Simon or talked about themselves as a couple.
No.
But Simon is in a better place than he was at the beginning.
Yeah. And Simon tells Baz, he's like, why don't you stay here and go back to Lamb? I know you could be with your own kind. And then Baz pretty much says, he's like, because I don't want to be anywhere. Being somewhere without you is not worth it.
Yeah. So they're starting to have this conversation, but unfortunately are cut off by a cliffhanger, which is Penelope rushing to the beach and being like, there's trouble at home. We have to go back to England now.
Yeah, there's
problems. That's literally the end of the book. That's literally the end of the book.
Literally the last line of the book. So the next one is called Anyway the Wind Blows. Excellent Queen lyric, by the way, because we've had Kansas lyrics so far. Carry On, My Wayward Son, which, by the way, if you're a fan of Supernatural, you know that song.
Carry On and Wayward Son. And then Anyway the Wind Blows is going to be the third book in the series. It's called the Simon Snow series now, so I don't know if it's going to be just a trilogy or if there's going to be more than that.
Yeah.
Rest assured we will read them when they come out. There's no release date yet.
Of course not.
I mean, Wayward Son came out last year. This came out in 2019. So, like, it's going to be at least another year, and that's not even taking into account the whole pandemic situation.
Yeah, the coronavirus pandemic, which, I don't know. But I will say with this book, like, with the first book, I, like, loved it and was interested all the way through. With this one, when we got to the point of vampires rule Las Vegas, I was like, really?
Oh, yeah?
I'm so over it.
I liked it. I liked it a ton.
I mean, like, maybe it's because I've read so many urban fantasy things where it's like, oh, yeah, vampires rule LA, vampires rule Las Vegas, vampires rule Chicago. I'm like...
What made me read this shitty New Orleans vampire book?
Hey, I did not know it was shitty when I picked it.
You can't criticize this book for having shitty Las Vegas vampires when the last book we read had shitty New Orleans vampires.
No. Hey, I did not like New Orleans.
Las Vegas is way more interesting as a vampire headquarters.
Definitely way more. Does that mean is Frank Sinatra still alive? I'm curious.
Modern Las Vegas as a vampire haven is a fascinating concept that could be a book all by itself. And I don't know. There
was a very short-lived TV series that I really liked called when I was a teenager called Moonlight. And it was vampires in Los Angeles. And so I guess in my brain that was like too similar.
No, they're like very different cities.
It wasn't the whole vampires rule Las Vegas thing that bothered me super much, but it was the whole Lamb Baz dynamic thing that I really did not like.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, Baz is a kid who grew up without a mother.
Yeah.
With a father who did not accept him for anything that he was. Like, not only was Baz's father have a problem with him as a vampire, but Baz's father has a problem with him as a gay boy. Like, that's established in the
all I saw was Lamb just manipulating Baz to get what he wanted. I didn't ever see it as like a very paternal relationship. I saw it more as a manipulative relationship.
It was a combination of the two. I think he was feeling paternal in the sense that, like, because I mean, we do find out essentially, like, he kind of shirks the title himself, but Lamb is considered the king of vampires. Like, he's in charge in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And so, like, to me, yeah, there is a certain paternalistic element to that because he's like, I want to make sure that my species continues and that my species does well. And, yeah, there's definitely an element of I can control this kid because he doesn't know shit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, don't act like there aren't parents that are like that.
Oh, yeah, there are parents that are like that. But I also didn't like kind of the direction Buzz started going. And I'm like, honey, you're better than this. I know you are.
But again, that's the whole point of this story. The thing is, there's only so many stories in the world. The last one was a very, very easy, very familiar one, which is like man versus society or whatever, right? Man versus society, man versus an enemy. This one is man versus self. It's like Simon's going through his shit, Boz is going through his shit, fucking
he's going through her shit.
Like, they're having to come to terms with who they are outside of school and who they are outside of.
And that's normally the whole point of a road trip, is a self-discovery kind of a thing. But the thing that I didn't like the Las Vegas portion because I didn't think it was like bad writing or anything like that. I didn't like it simply because I was so invested in Boz at that point. and I did not want him going down the road he had started going down. Does that make sense? Where I'm like, no, come back.
I mean, it makes sense that you didn't want to see him doing that, but being like it's not a good part of the book doesn't make sense. Like, because
no, I'm saying that's when I started to kind of lose interest, because I'm like, if Boz goes completely off the deep end at the end of this book, I'm gonna be mad.
But he doesn't. He does the same. It's the same thing.
No,
it's like not.
He doesn't, but you can't know that till you finish the book.
Well, right, but so getting tired of it and walking away before you get your answer is crazy. Why are you gonna be like, I don't know how this is going?
It was a part of the book where I didn't want to look. You know, it's kind of like in the when Aziraphale is doing a magic show in Good Omens and it's secondhand embarrassment. You're like, I don't want to watch. That's what it was. It was, I don't want to watch.
Can't relate. But yeah, I think overall it did a pretty good job. Like, I think I would have liked to see more time on the road, but like the book was very clear from the very beginning. It's like, we're trying to have a road trip and it turns into a fucking crisis.
Nightmare show.
So like that was very clear from the way the book was described and marketed. Yeah. So I like don't resent it for not doing that. But it would have been fun to read just like a happy-go-lucky road trip novel. But I think both Simon and Boz have a lot more work to do before they can get to that point. And there's another interesting thing here that's been introduced is the concept that Boz isn't going to age anymore.
No.
Like, Boz is immortal. Boz is going to be 19 forever.
Yeah.
I mean, he's grown, because I think they said that vampires, they grow, like he was turned when he was a toddler, but like once they hit adolescence and adulthood, they just stop aging at that point. So Boz is probably not going to get much older than 21.
No.
Ever. And so like,
and Simon will.
That's another thing. I don't know if she's going to delve into that or not, or if they're going to try and cure Boz, or I have no idea, because there's no summary for what book comes next, and that's probably going to be a trilogy. I can't speak to it because obviously I don't know, but this does have that vibe of a middle book where there's a lot that's left unresolved, and like
there's still things
on its own. It has to have books on either side of it to prop it up.
Yeah, and there's stuff from the first book that hasn't been answered, revealed.
I know that the mage is his father.
I know. That's a major thing. Or like the voice that he kept hearing was Lucy, his mother.
Like, maybe he won't ever know those things. They're not necessary for him to continue on.
No.
He doesn't need to know them, but from the audience perspective, you want it to be resolved.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But I really enjoyed it anyway.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
From second book in the series where it has to have the books on either side to be fully.
Yeah, it does.
And this is my personal philosophy with books that are in the middle of series is that I always reread them once I have the book on either end of them.
Yeah.
You're going to appreciate them more with both a beginning and an end, because a middle book is not got a beginning, middle, and end in the same sense that just a standalone book does.
Yeah.
It is a middle. It is a middle.
One of my favorite books is a middle book in a series of 3. It's called The Infernals. It's the Samuel Johnson series by John Connolly, which we should read those. Because the first one was interesting and I liked it a lot, but I really loved the second one a lot more because the main character really kind of grew up a lot more in the second book.
Well, I think there's more in this book.
Very contained story as well.
Well, I think that this book has a lot to offer. Like, I think it develops the concept of the mage world a lot more. It develops the difference between mages in America and mages in Europe. Like, who knows what mages
well. That was done exceptionally well. I think that was done better than what J.K. Rowling did with the whole concept of mages in Europe versus mages in America.
Yeah, and the whole concept
it makes more sense.
And like we talked about this in the last episode of this, that we really enjoyed the concept of like magic being tied to language, but this also like deepens that kind of lore and explains it further in a really interesting way. Because I was thinking about like, oh, like, what spells would be good in America. And then it's like, also you see another thing that's interesting is like, they say that spells with curses or spells out of songs are not great because their efficacy is not.
Yeah, or things that tie to
But
popular culture, but so much of American culture is pop culture.
Well, that's the other thing is like you said is like 100 miles is forever in Europe, but 100 years is forever in America. Like this is a very young country. There's not a huge backlog of literature and, things like that, idioms that are specifically American that exist. Like, sure, you've got your founding fathers and like, I'm sure you could use, a George Washington speech as a spell pretty easily.
Yeah.
But like,
that's
250 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, in Britain, it's like you can go back 700 years. You can go back to King Arthur and be like, oh, here's a King Arthur quote that works as a spell because it's 900 years old, like.
Yeah.
So America, like by necessity, America's mage culture cannot be as like inclusive, both because of the size and the geography and because of the age of the country.
Yeah, and the spread of cultures. Because what is a common phrase in English here is not necessarily a common phrase for somebody who's coming here and English is their second language.
I mean, what's a common phrase in English here is not a common phrase in English here. Like I can say, you look as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, and you know what that means. But if I said that in California, I'd get laughed out of the room.
Exactly.
Like the country is too big to be cohesive across. Like England is a smaller country, so the culture within the country, I'm not saying that there's not a ton of different people in England. And like there's also something interesting I was wondering about, with like cities like London or New York, like what magic would be like in a city like London or New York. Like if you go to Little Italy, are you going to be able to use magic in a different way than you would in Chinatown,
Yeah. And what magic works in Italy may not work in Little Italy.
Right. So it's like how specific does it get? But this book, delved into that a lot more deeply than the first book did. And I can only hope that further books will explore that even more.
Well, they're going back to Watford. They're going back to England.
Yeah.
Which means a lot of their language is going to go back to what it was before.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of, I really like that the book explored how the language is not the same in both places, so therefore the magic's not always going to work the same.
Right. Yeah. No, that was really interesting. I really like that. The depth of the lore there.
Yeah. This spell that chooses like drop it and reverse it kind of a thing, which is from a song.
Missy Elliott.
Yeah, it's Missy Elliott, which works hella good in America. Maybe not super well in England.
Right. So, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff that this book did. I think probably the story I enjoyed, but it was secondary for me to the world building.
Yeah, I very much appreciated the world building a little bit more than the story. I would like to I kind of want to hear Shepard's story now with him. Yeah, especially with the reveal at the end where his soul is apparently tied to a demon.
Yeah, the reason that the vampire couldn't feed off of him is because his soul already belongs to a demon.
Yeah, and Penny asked him about it. He's like, well, it's the classic wrong place, wrong time kind of a thing.
So she swore that she was going to break it for him, and I think he's going to go back to Europe with them.
Yeah, I hope he does.
So, yeah, he's a fun character. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, because I want to hear Simon's story about how he befriended all these creatures.
Yeah, Shepard's stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. I mean, what would you say?
Overall, I liked it. I had a good time. I read it. I actually read this. I didn't listen to it on Audible like I do 90% of our books. So, Good Lord, Casey.
I'm in my studio right now. The amount of props and wigs in this room is just obscene, really.
Yeah.
So.
I'd probably give it 3.5. 3.5 bottles, maybe 3.75 because I really enjoyed it. I don't think enough to give it 4 bottles.
You said it was one of the best you'd read this year.
Yeah, it's one of the best I've read in a while. I actually read this book instead of listening to it on Audibles, and I did it in 3 days, which is really hard, especially with twins.
Yeah.
But I was talking to somebody about it where it's really hard for me nowadays to find a book that I just devour in a day. I'm lucky to get maybe 1 or 2 of those a year, but this is really good. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. If I was a teenager, I probably would have devoured it in like a day.
Yeah.
So how many, I don't have a bottle. How many bottles would you give it, Casey?
I'd say I'd give it, 4. I really liked it. I really like Rainbow Rowell. Most everything I've read of hers I've liked, and I'm really excited that there's another book coming for this series because I really enjoy the time in, and Boz especially. I really enjoy Boz as a character. So I really liked it. Overall, that puts it at about a 3.75 bottles.
Yeah, right around there.
Pretty good.
That's a pretty good rating for us.
Yeah. So yeah, check it out. Second book in the Simon Snow series is Wayward Son.
Yes.
So yeah, check it out. Our next book is going to be Jack Kerouac's On the Road, an old classic, coming out on the 30th.
Because April is ironically road trip month.
Yeah. So keep your eyes open for that. It'll still be in quarantine. We're still doing videos in quarantine for the foreseeable future. If anything changes, you'll always find out any details about how things might be changing on our Twitter or Facebook pages. We also have an Instagram and Patreon. We would love to hear from you, comments or donations on Patreon.
Yeah. And if you join Patreon, every episode going back to Carmilla, including our Quarantini episode, has a blooper reel, which is exclusive only to our Patreon members. So if you want to see Casey and I mess up and make funny faces, please donate.
Do that.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. For more information, visit us at litliteraturePodcast.com or check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And remember, too much work and no vacation deserves at least a small libation. Cheers!